Welcome to the PenniZ Show, where you get to learn how real people overcame real issues. Get ready to take notes and, most importantly, take action. Here's your host, PenniZ.
Hi, everyone. This is PenniZ with the PenniZ Show. We are here focusing on transforming lives one life at a time with real, relevant, and relatable topics. As you are all aware, we are in a series called Overcoming I'm Not Enough. If you've felt not good enough, whether it's for a moment, for a season, or for years in your life, we help to address your I'm Not Enough story by sharing our guest stories of overcoming I'm Not Enough. Tools and techniques that you can use in your life on a daily basis to become more than enough. Today, our special guest is Sharon Lynn Wyeth. And please, I would love to introduce Sharon because she has an incredible backstory and she helps people all over the world. So Sharon is recognized internationally as a name expert as she can determine one's strengths, challenges, and the purpose of one's life in deciphering a person's name. Sharon created Neimology Science, the study of the placement of letters in a name. After 15 years of research, followed by 3 years of testing her theories through traveling over 70 countries, including Russia, India, and China, Sharon wanted to see if her methodology held true in even different languages. She found that it does. She then continued to develop how to interpret names over the next 22 years of her life with Neimology Science. Sharon today, through her company Neimology Science, assists different individual groups, human resource departments choosing what appropriate candidate to interview, lawyers on how to pick juries and how to present a case to the jury and to the judge, as well as helping couples and families to seek how to better communicate in their relationship. She is also the best-selling author of Know the Name, Know the Person, and has won awards for excellence in writing. Please welcome with me to the show, Sharon Lynn Wyeth. Sharon, welcome.
Penny, it's such an honor to be here with you and really to share the backstory of how so many of us, and I think the vast majority of us go through, if not a long period of time, at least areas of, where we're not feeling good enough.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And many of them, many of our listeners have heard my story. For me, it was unfortunately 44 years of my life that I was self-sabotaging and I didn't know, but thank goodness I haven't found a guest yet that wasn't as long. So would you just share with us a little bit about what have you identified in your past, one of your I'm Not Enough stories?
Well, I grew up with 4 sisters, and 3 of my sisters all got into the gifted program. And my 4th sister had a disability. So she didn't count as competition, whatever. So because of that, I always felt like the dumbest one in the family. Now, my dad is a physician and my mom was an inventor and an artist and incredibly talented. So when I watched how fast everybody caught on to things, only I didn't. I was slower. But once I caught on, I kept it. But compared to them, I was the dumbest one in the family. And that makes you definitely feel like you're not good enough, And then I was treated differently than everybody else. And I always thought, well, I'm being treated differently because I'm dumber than they are. I don't think until I came out with Neimology Science and that my mother even thought I had some intelligence because it was so different than my sisters. And when you're in that family where everybody talks over your head, and I learned to be very quiet. So you didn't have to open your mouth and prove you were stupid. You just kept quiet. And then maybe they thought you'd fit in like everybody else, And then I went to a high school that was highly, highly competitive. If you looked at the demographics of the area, the people that could afford to live there did very, very well. And so the majority of the kids were incredibly bright. And my best friend in high school moved away after her 11th year. So her senior year, what a hard year to move. Her senior year was in a different school. And I remember her writing to me saying, you know what, we thought we were the dumbest, but in this school over here, I'm considered one of the smartest. It's just our school.
Wow. That's amazing when you say that, because I will have to say you're the first guest that has talked about the issue of feeling dumb in a family and maybe in a school. We've had other topics that has been discussed on the PenniZ show, but I'd like for you to share a little bit because, one of the things that has been a consistent theme is that I would say all of our overcoming I'm not enough or I'm not enough stories come from when we were children or maybe even high school at the very latest. And so how did that affect you? Because there are people out there that are parents that have kids that might be experiencing this now. And so first we can help them. And secondly, there are going to be listeners out there that are adults that are feeling the same way that you felt. So share a little bit more of, when you were a child, how that made you feel and some of the things that you decided that you were going to do in order to overcome that mindset.
Well, I didn't want to overcome it. I just wanted to prove them all wrong. And to me, it wasn't overcoming it. It was like, how do I handle it? What do I do about this? And so I remember my oldest sister was ambidextrous. So every time we wrote something, like in fourth grade, we had to write on our handwriting a lot. I would come home and do it with my other hand so that by the end of the year, I had practiced just enough with both my hands, which really came in handy when I became a school teacher and I sawed off some of my fingers, which is a whole nother story because I was a drafting teacher and looked up at the automatic feeder and there went my fingers. But anyway, they got sewed back on. So, but I couldn't write with my right hand because they were all bandaged up. And so all that practice in fourth grade with writing with my left hand came in handy because I still had to teach on the board and whatnot, So but I looked at how I overdid everything. Every 4 years, I would manage to get straight A's. Other than that, I would come home with a B, and my dad would say, who are you flirting with? Who are you sitting next to? Because if you were paying attention, you'd get an A. And I thought, yeah, maybe for my sisters, but I'm studying. I am working really hard. I was very focused. I was very dedicated. In my name, in my birth name, I had no sense of humor. I had no play. All I ever did was work. And I would leave school and I would go dance for 2.5 hours. I did ballet. And I would dance, and then I would come home, and there was dinner, and then I would stay up as long as it took, and I would study. And I didn't eat lunch with everybody else. I would go and I would study in the library. I mean, I was constantly taking every chance. If the teacher was wasting our time, in my opinion, and bird walking, I would get out others' homework, and I would start. I mean, or I would read ahead on my own. So I overcompensated. And I think a lot of people do that because we don't feel comfortable being compared to others. And, I didn't have to figure it out for myself that I wasn't as bright as my sisters because everybody around me would always say how bright they were. And I never heard them saying that about me. It was like,
I know.
This is pretty obvious.
It's interesting as you're sharing your story. I had the same, that was one of many of my not feeling good enough is that, and I don't know if it was easy for you in school, but school was not easy for me. And I didn't get straight A's, nor did I get several A's most of my years in elementary, middle, and high school. And I really had to study and study and study just to get probably a B or a C, to be very honest with you. So I was not the brightest when it came to the letter grades. And my brother, he didn't even have to study and he'd get passed with straight A's. And so
those are my sisters.
I completely understand your somewhat of your pain and overcoming because I felt like I had to overcome in other areas because I wasn't good enough or smart enough as my brother. When you were saying that story kind of resonated with me. And I'm like,
I was fortunate because my dad would take me aside and he'd say, I see you're struggling here. Let me show you a different way of getting to the same answer. And then he had these great discussions. And when he would pick me up from ballet, which was downtown, and he worked just a couple of blocks away is his office as a doctor. So we had a half an hour ride home 4 days a week. So I figured at times I got more private time with Dad than Mom did. But on the way home, he'd be saying, I realize you're struggling here, or I see that you're not doing this the same as others. So let's talk about this. So I really felt that I gained so much because my dad was a natural teacher, and I was so fortunate to have him. And I feel badly for kids whose parents don't recognize it or take the time, to say, okay, you're struggling. What can we do?
And that's great that you bring that up, and a great lesson for those of those of our listeners, if you have a child struggling, with math or with school or just with, being able to play sports or anything like that, I encourage you guys, I challenge you to stop and start asking those questions and engaging, because I had parents that raised me well. I think they did a good job as parents, but I didn't have those conversations like you have. And I just wonder sometimes, and you can't go back, where I would be or what kind of lifestyle or what kind of change would have happened if I would have had a little bit of that mentorship, a little bit of that discussion, encouragement, coaching. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that is so, so important in our life at any age of our life, but definitely when we're children and young adults.
Well, I flunked out of math for 2 years. And I want to say this because I ended up in college majoring in math and I have my master's. So how did I flunk out? Right? In 6th and 7th grade. The 6th grade teacher said, "You're just hopeless." And he says, "You're so far behind in reading. I'm just going to give you 2 reading classes and no math class," because it was self-contained, still in 6th grade. And then we went to junior high. And in junior high, the teacher graded us on our appearance and not on what we knew, And so I didn't learn anything. And then because my sisters were so talented, I got put into an honors class in math for 8th grade. And I was like, are you kidding me? I can add, subtract, and multiply with whole numbers. And that's it. I can't divide. I can't do fractions. I can't do decimals, percents, none of it. And I had the most incredible teacher for both 8th and 9th grade. I was so, so fortunate. And I look back, and those of us that had her for those 2 years, and then she went into counseling, and she had just come back from having been out from the birth of her baby. So all of us that had her for those 2 years were just so lucky. And a third of us went into math or math-related fields in college, and it was all because of the foundation we got from her. And I was in this class where kids just caught on so incredibly fast, and then she'd come over to me and she'd say, "Honey, you just need to see it this way." And she'd show me a different way of doing things. And it made such sense to me. And she so helped me and promoted me and said, "We'll just catch you up." And there was no judgment involved. And so I worked with her. And then when another kid was behind, when I was in 9th grade, a 7th grader, she said, "I want you to go tutor him." And when I realized how much I had learned and that I could help that 7th grader, that's when I decided I wanted to be a math teacher and do for others what she did for me.
Oh, that's incredible. I absolutely love that. It gave me goosebumps when you were sharing that story, Sharon, because we have challenges in life, whether we call them "I'm not enough" or we're just not feeling that we're successful in something. And you were talking about, how do I do it better? How do I do it different? And then taking that and thinking of it and looking at it differently. Because sometimes we learn something as a child that doesn't necessarily correlate with continuing that same viewpoint or that same way of doing it through our life. And you change that through that teacher, and then you were given the reward of the success that you had in 8th and 9th grade, and to able to help that 7th grader and then help so many other people. So thank you. I just want to thank you for that. That just gives me goosebumps. So I really do appreciate it.
And teachers make such a difference, but our parents are so important. I mean, my mother, bless her heart, she made sure we were all clean and we had good clothes and she fed us well, but she did not excite my brain except for in the area of religion, because that was her thing, okay, and spirituality. Whereas, and I'm very grateful for that piece, whereas my dad was very good at what if, for example, he would play these what if games with us kids at the dinner table. What if a policeman, now this is before cell phones and we had the rotary phones on the walls. What if a policeman came and knocked on your door and said, "I need to use your phone. There's a riot out here. We need to get more cops out here." What would you do? And then when we all said, well, we'd open the door and let him in to use the phone, my dad says, "Well, how do you know it was a real cop? How do you know it wasn't a bad guy?" And he would constantly, we'd give answers, and then he'd say, "Well, then how do you know that he didn't steal somebody's identification that he was showing you? How do you know if," and so he literally taught us how to think and how to look at things differently. And I was so fortunate that between him teaching us how to think outside the box and to see future, what your actions are going to cause, and coupled with this fabulous Mrs. Isabel Skidmore, she's no longer on the planet, but a fabulous, fabulous teacher for math in 8th and 9th grade, who would say, we just need to look at it differently. I started looking at life differently. And I think that's the whole key, is to look at life from looking at your experiences and what are your experiences teaching you versus what other people tell you life is supposed to be like. Because
Absolutely.
you start evaluating life from your experiences and let those teach you, because that way you don't say, oh, this was supposed to happen, but it didn't, so I must have done something wrong. Instead, you say, this is what happens when I do this, so let's see if it happens again. Well, if that's the case, then my teaching could have been an error, or it could have worked differently for them than it does for me. And so now I need to adjust to what life is teaching me versus what others are teaching me. Mm-hmm. And I think as you come into your own, I mean, I ran for student government. I did all kinds of things to try to show myself that I was just as good as all those other smart kids, and out into the what I call the real world, into the non-sequestered education part, I'm really considered very smart in some respects, and I could be dumber than a box of rocks in other areas. And so what I've learned is stay in my own lane. Stay in the lane where I can succeed and have a gift to share, and then let others stay in their lanes where they have a gift to share. And I just look at it, I think, Einstein said that he considers everybody a genius. Now, why would he say that if it wasn't true? And I think what he's really saying is we all have our lanes. And if we can stay in our lane and pay the people that are in their lane to do what we need from that lane, then everybody gets to be successful and feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we don't stay in our lane, or when we're feeling less than, it's almost a limited belief. It's a limited belief that I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not pretty enough. And so it's just a matter of changing your mindset. You might have to practice some skill sets or tools or, techniques in order to change that action. But it's really adjusting from the past moving forward to be, kind of your past, and then deciding where you're at now, evaluating and looking, how do you want to handle things and how do you want to look at things moving forward? And we all have that capability of doing it.
Well, I remember in college telling my mom, my two best friends, one was the sophomore princess, whatever, football princess for the sophomore class, and the other one was the freshman princess anyway, they were both gorgeous. And I told my mother, I said, I feel so ugly all the time because look who my friends are. And she goes, that's a really simple thing to fix, when you're feeling ugly. And I said, oh yeah, Mom, how do you do that? And she goes, just get uglier friends than you.
Yeah.
Great, not a big help.
That's one way. That's a good point.
But my sisters, besides being geniuses, they all modeled. Mm. So I really felt like not good enough in every area. They have small bones and I have large bones. But I think the difference is when you realize it's time not to compare yourself with others, that's when you start going in your own lane.
Yeah, I agree with you. I call it the comparison game, you just have to stop. When your mind starts wandering, you just have to figure out whether it's a word or it's an action or something, just to stop and just say, this isn't serving me any good, this isn't serving me in my life. And, they might be good at this, but I'm good at this, like you said, as far as, we've all been given certain skills that when we recognize them and we use them, it's truly amazing what comes out of us. So,
our names, our birth names literally show us our direction in life, where our talents lie and where our challenges are going to lie. And it literally says how to solve the challenges. I mean, I love looking at somebody's name, and it really hit me when we were driving 5 vans. I was teaching in San Antonio, and we were driving to the Houston NASA Center to give our kids a field trip, and it was cheaper to rent 5 vans than it was a school bus. So we had all these kids piled in. And on the way back, I said, guys, I was up at 4 o'clock this morning while you guys were all sleeping in the van to drive us here so we could spend the day, and now we're driving back. And I said, y'all have to take turns coming up here and entertaining me so I can stay awake. So I kept flipping the child that was in the front seat with me. And one of them, right toward the beginning of the drive, and it's a 4-hour drive, said something about they didn't know what they were good at. And I could already look at names at that point. And so I said, okay, this is what I've observed, because I observed it in their name. So I said, this is what I've observed. And I would start telling them. And then they go, well, I am good at that. Well, I am good at that. I didn't realize I had those gifts. And then another kid would be listening and say, can I go next? What have you observed about me? And I ended up doing everybody in the van. And I thought, here I am teaching 8th graders, and we in the school system haven't encouraged them or let them see where their own gifts are yet. What's wrong with us?
Mm-hmm. I absolutely, that was a perfect segue to going into what you're doing now and what you've done for several decades. So I wanted to ask you, how did your past determine going into Neimology? And then what do you do today? And just share with our listeners a little bit more about it. I'm fascinated with this, by the way. So I will let you take the floor again.
Well, Penny, I was in education systems 40 years. Last year was my last year in the school systems. And I took a break in the middle when I was testing Neimology Science. But so it was a good thing I started, when I was just a baby as a teacher. I was 20 years old when I got my teaching credential. And so what it did is I wanted to be able to make a safe learning space for other kids and to help them. And in the beginning of my 7th year of teaching, when I went to do the random seating chart before you get to know the kids, I realized that my brain was acting as if I already knew them. Like, don't put Josh next to Julie together. They're going to be clowns, and Stephanie's going to be stubborn. And, and I always created a seating chart where I felt every child would feel safe with the people around them, because you don't learn if you're not safe. And so anyway, I thought, okay, my brain, thoroughly trained in patterns now with all that math and looking at math differently than others, I thought, okay, it's picked up some kind of pattern. Now, how do I make conscious what it's picked up? And that's what took me time to do. And then I had to test it. And eventually, when I thought 15 years later, it took me to figure out all the patterns in the names. And then I went and took a break from, I was an administrator then. So I took a break from that and went traveling. And I wanted to test it. And it got tested in 49 of our states, everywhere but Montana. And it got tested in over 70 countries around the world. So does it work in foreign languages? And it does. And so And what I love about Neimology Science is it was a way to instantly know how to group my kids so that they would be good in that classroom, and what style of learning that they had. That's all in their name. And what I could do what was their life goals. And then I thought, well, how can I help them while they're in my classroom during those life goals? And today I think it's so interesting because on the side, I started working with HR departments and different individuals to help them, because so many of our answers are in that name if you just know how to read the name, And so I started giving what I call readings on the side, and built up this side business that now that I'm retired from education, I'm just doing the side business now full time, which is really fun because I have more time to do it. But there's so much information in there. And to me, it's another way of teaching. And now, instead of just teaching humanity along with math, it's like now I just get to teach and share really like life purpose and life lessons, and how do we deal with crap that comes along, and how do you take the higher road. And for an example, I have done so much reading on all the different religions of the world because that was my mom's thing. And so I read because I wanted to find out for myself. Tremendous reading. So I look at things differently. So for an example, before we're born, if we look at how we look and we say, oh, I don't like how I look because that one's prettier, or I'm ugly, or whatever, right? And so instead, if we realize that before you're born, you go in and there's this big shop, and there's the eye section and the ear section and the nose section, and you get to see all the possible combinations that you could have from your parents' DNAs, okay? So then you go into the eye section, the eye department, and you go, what kind of set of eyes do I want to look like? And you get to pick them. And then you go into the nose, and you go, out of all these different noses that can come from my parents' DNA, which one do I want? And then you get to pick it. And you go through and you get to pick every single piece of who you are. So when you're born, you look exactly like you wanted to look. So if you're looking in the mirror and you're not happy with what you're seeing, you say, when I had bigger vision, when I could see all of it and had all the choices, this is what I chose. So there must be a reason, and I'm not going to second guess myself. I look exactly like what I wanted to look for whatever reason. So I'm going to trust that I did that as a soul and did it right.
So I have a question for you, and I hadn't asked Sharon to do this before the show. So for all of our listeners, and I will ask this. For those who don't know or have never experienced Neimology Science or Neimology, would you be able to just share briefly a quick example of what that would look like for someone?
So Penny, if I may, with your name, okay?
Okay.
And I just want to say your current last name, is that married or maiden?
Maiden.
Okay, that's all I need to know as I'm going forward. Okay, so in your name, it says that one of the things that you're very good at is you have the power of influence, okay? And you remember how to play. Like in my name, I was always serious. When I literally, once I learned this and I changed my last name, I put some humor in there because I thought, my God, I'm always working. I need to be able to play. And so you have play in your name, and you have the ability to remind others how to play and how to have fun, because some people forget. They get so oriented on work. They're always thinking work, whatever. So it says, your name says that you have a great sense of humor, that you have a very good memory, especially in the areas of interest, that you pick up things from all around, that you have your own organizational style so that you always can put your hands on everything that you want. You need to share your detective skills. You're getting to the bottom of things. People would naturally come to you and dump their problems on you because you're a very good listener. And then because of your own life experiences, you generally give them very good suggestions on these are other things you can do. One of the challenges is not taking on their stuff as your stuff and trying to solve it with them, but to be able to hand it back and say, okay, now we've had this great discussion, so what are you going to do next? That's a very nice way of handing it back to them, to letting them know we are not solving this problem, it's still your problem. Okay?
I like that.
But so that's what I'm saying. It's an example of how the answers are sitting in the name. Your name says that you're going to do things your own style, that you've had to figure out your own way of doing things, that you can't copy somebody else because it doesn't work for you. Even if it works for others that copy, it just doesn't work for you. You were taught that family is very important, that you have duty to family. So even if you don't like family, you're in a bad mood with family, something's happened with family, you still have a duty to show up and to be there for family. Okay? It says that you're an agent for change. You can help people move through the steps of change and to be able to do it comfortably. Okay? That's part of what's in your name. So that's a very small sampling, but you get, I jokingly call it everything from the bedroom to the boardroom about somebody that's in their name. You literally can tell what kind of sex they enjoy, all the way up to if they're the CEO of the company, if they'd want to be one, and then how they would rule or how they would be the leader, and where they fit, in between, and in your learning style, what kind of presence you like. I mean, there's so much information in a name. And so I love getting together with couples or with individuals to help them see who they are from their soul's perspective. And we all came down with 7 reasons what we're here to learn. And that comes out in a reading with somebody. Here's the reasons how you're here, and here's the gifts you gave yourself to accomplish those. And if it's outside of those realms, that's not in your lane, who cares? This is your lane, in other words. And then you can compare your name with somebody else, and you can see what pushes your buttons and what you do that pushes their buttons, and how to solve it. It's usually small little tweaks, because it's the little things that start bugging us about each other. It's not the big things, it's the little things, and why they bother us and what to do about it so that they don't.
Well, Sharon, yes. Thank you. First off, I kind of put you on the spot, and I appreciate that very much. And she's right on to all of our listeners in many ways. So I'm excited actually to have a reading of my own in depth. And like you had mentioned, you can help individuals, you can help couples, you can help people in the boardroom. It is just amazing the talent and technique and the options that you have in order to help people expand people's lives. So for those of my listeners and everyone who gets the privilege of listening or watching the PenniZ show with Sharon Lynn Wyeth, how can they get in touch with you so they too can experience your extreme, wonderful, unique talents in their life?
Well, thank you, Penny. The easiest way is to go to the website, knowthename.com, so that if you're driving or doing something else right now and you want to be able to remember it, you go, oh, yeah, I need to know the name. Oh, yeah, that was it, knowthename.com. And so, and that way they can learn it for themselves with the best-selling book, the first book out of the 3 in the series. It will eventually be 5 in the series. And then they can do that, but through the website, there's a contact me page, and that's the easiest way.
Excellent.
Or just info@knowthename.com.
Excellent. Well, Sharon, we are also going to have all of your contact information on www.thepennizshow.com. We will be featuring you on our Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and all of our social media. You can reach the PenniZ Show and see Sharon or listen to her on the iTunes and the Android podcast apps. So any last words of wisdom to our listeners?
Each one of us is here for a different reason and a different purpose. So when we're true to ourselves and we go with our own instinct and we trust ourselves, that's when we lead the happiest lives. When we let other people try to tell us how to lead our life, that's when we get miserable and we get diseases. So I would say, trust you. You will have your lane. I think Einstein's right. From the thousands of names I've read, we all have geniuses in some area. And if you need help finding it, call me. But other than that, trust yourself, go with your gut, and that way you can shine.
Well, thank you again, Sharon. This is PenniZ with the PenniZ Show, and everyone have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you want to hear more, including specific ways to empower yourself, go to thepennizshow.com.